Hello and welcome to Regent Leadership Live. My name is Colin Pinks, Director of Regent Leadership. You join us today for the fourth episode of our series of broadcasts. Today we'll be talking about how leaders can unleash team capabilities. Today I'm joined by Paul Z. Jackson. Paul is Director of the Solutions Focus, and by Matt Smith, who is CEO of SteelEye. Always alongside me is Kylie, who'll be bringing in the questions from social media as always.
Yeah, thank you, Colin. And of course, you can pose questions to our guests using our hashtag #ExecEdTV on any of our social media streams.
Fantastic. So just as a starter, if you can get a couple of seconds of background about where you sit in the leadership space and how you come to Paul.
Thanks, Colin. My main experience of leadership has been in developing a big international network, a volunteer network of people who are applied improvisers. That's people who like to use the skills and techniques of improvisation off stage, beyond the stage, for things such as leadership and teamwork. And that's been going for some 17 years. Okay. I co-founded it and have been serving in various capacities recently as president and co-president.
Brilliant. Thank you, Paul. Matt?
Yeah, so my background is management. I found myself at a very young age running the bakeries for the East Coast Main Line Railway in the UK, GNER. And I was very young. I had a team all over the country up into Scotland, and I had to learn fast, not just how to run a bakery business, but to actually lead people. Throughout my career, I've been a manager for most of it. I spent nearly 8 years as the Chief Information Officer for a global trading house. Spent some time with a big fintech firm where I was leading a product business, and more recently I'm the CEO, the Chief Executive of SteelEye, where we have an ever-increasing team, and we're having to build culture, we're having to build inter-team dynamics.
Okay, brilliant. So I think that's a great place to start. To start off thinking about what are the challenges when you kind of when we talk about teams today. What's the kind of environment like at the moment that influences those kind of challenges, Matt?
Well, certainly, it all begins with people. People spend their days in work, spending more time in many cases with their colleagues than they do with their family. And to make that work, you have to have harmony. And the culture will derive from how people interact. I think at the heart of it is trust, transparency, and communication. And I think if you can achieve those three things, you can start to foster an environment where people feel valued. And by doing that, then you start to build teams that are effective. And it's not an easy thing to do, and sometimes it takes some time. But if you achieve it, then you end up with great results.
Yeah. Paul, your kind of thoughts about how we are at the moment and what are the challenges for teams and people working together?
Well, I do agree with Matt. It's very much about people, and in teams at the moment there's a lot more speed of change, a lot more uncertainty, and so the connections between people and ways of bringing the best out of people become increasingly significant.
What do you think has changed to make this even more difficult than it has been, let's say, 10 or 20 years ago?
The speed of change.
What's changed in the world to get us to the point where we are at the moment?
There's less stability politically and environmentally. A huge change in the speed with which information and communication is happening with the rise of the internet and social media. And companies don't last as long, typically.
Yes.
I think globalization as well has a big effect on inter-team dynamics. 15, 20 years ago there were global businesses, but in many instances companies were domestic, and those that were global operated independently. And technology and travel has enabled these global teams now to start to become one. So you suddenly find yourself with potentially teams in Asia and North America and Europe, and you not only have to think about how do the people interact with each other, they're present on the ground next to each other, but also how do you actually interact with your colleagues who come from different cultures and different backgrounds, speak different languages, and it becomes ever more difficult for you to actually structure that.
Yes, I was going to now you're saying that kind of reminds me of when I went to business school a few years ago. It's a very international course, and then not only are you thinking about the information and the new knowledge, is actually the cultures and the learning styles and the kind of status of people is really different, and they're the things you've got to really learn about. So
Yeah, and the membership of your team changes quite quickly.
yeah.
I think the unit of work is the project, and from the start of a project to the end of the project may not even have the same team members that you began with. So how do you manage or lead or create circumstances and conditions within a project so that you can accomplish the goals?
Are there kind of certain things that you could, almost before we get to the people aspects, are there certain things that you'd need to put in place, talking about international teams, and other kind of things that can help us, or even before we get onto the people side of it?
Yes, and that clarity, particularly what are we trying to achieve? And people often will state a goal, but it's vague and nebulous. So in a solution focus approach, which is the approach that my organisation uses, articulating exactly what's wanted, how we would know we'd got it, what does success look like, and communicating that, articulating that, preferably with the members of the team and other stakeholders contributing to the articulation of that vision, makes a huge difference, because then you know where you're going and what you're working towards.
Yeah.
And obviously the evolution in technology changes things dramatically, right? So in many cases, I can have a conversation with somebody in another country almost as if I'm sat next to them.
Yes.
And we take that for granted now. I think, as that starts to come into effect, it really drives a difference in how people can interact. Gone are the days where you're only required or only capable of having a conference call with somebody, where you can't see their face, you can't see their expressions or their emotions. And the clarity of picture through video conferencing now is getting better day by day. So it starts to become more real than it ever has been before.
Yeah.
It means you can pick your team from anywhere around the world as well. You're not confined to your father, son, daughters and cousins. You can have an international team based on precise skills or precise locations that are needed. So it gets much more exciting and more complex interactions.
Yeah, exactly. I think your point you made as well, Matt, of because it gets so easy and it's like someone is sitting next to you, I think sometimes we make assumptions about things, don't we? So they must be exactly the same. And so it's really easy to forget those cultural differences, which are because we're in a different place. Because I'm just talking to someone next to me. It's really easy to forget those things. I think it's just kind of
absolutely. We at SteelEye right now are going through this change where we're starting to look at. Well, we're in the process of offshoring some development work, and we're working with a firm in the Ukraine. And the prerequisite for us to do this was not about we're just going to give a piece of work to somebody. It's these people need to be part of our team.
Yeah.
And we follow an agile development process, which means people talk every day, and they spend time at a specific moment in every single day to go around the team and discuss what they're working on. And we need those people in those foreign places to actually be part of that team. So as we do that, video conferencing makes that possible. We can see them. They feel like they're actually part of the team, even though they're in another country. And it's no different to them being in a different room or a different floor in a building.
Yeah, exactly.
The boundary of the team becomes less distinct as well, because you might have clients, customers becoming part of the team, particularly in agile processes. You're involving all the different stakeholders. So it's not even boundaried by your own company. The team starts to include people who would traditionally not be part of the team.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the nice kind of way to move on to think. Actually, we've created all these things to allow us to do this internationally and these kind of things. Yet, what are some of the things that you think are essential to help people work more effectively in a team environment? Particularly as you've talked about, you're talking about projects and ideas and these kind of things. What are almost the skills that we then start to talk about?
The number one to me is talking, right? Like people get so used to communicating via email, and we're a small company, but the amount of times I see people going back and forth having this conversation in email when they're sat just across the room from each other.
Yes.
And getting up and talking, not only will it mean that they get to the results they're trying to achieve better, that camaraderie-ship of going through and working through ideas, interacting, bouncing ideas off each other is very healthy. And if you fail to make that part of your core culture, you suddenly have this kind of virtual world where people are not interacting. And I think you lose a lot of innovation, you're going to lose a lot of creativity that you would otherwise find from people talking.
Yeah.
That's the point of having a team in the first place, rather than trying to do everything on your own. the action is in the interaction. So all the secrets of the good teamwork are how do you create more effective interactions. And people talking is an old-fashioned one, but surprisingly successful.
Yeah.
Yes, I think, exactly as you say, Matt, it's kind of that we forget how to do the basics and kind of go back to the basics, don't we? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we teach people to have good conversations in order to improve teamwork and project work.
Yes.
So a good conversation won't just break out spontaneously necessarily. If you structure it in such a way that it's going to be constructive, you get better results.
Yeah, exactly. Kylie, I was going to say probably a nice point to say, are we kind of getting any perspectives in from our network?
Yeah, one of our viewers on Facebook actually is talking about skills that are required, and how it's quite interesting that all that environment that you've just talked about has moved us into a space where all those people-centric skills have become more important to develop as a leader and as a team member. So things like people management, emotional intelligence, creative thinking, and all those things that you've talked about kind of talking to each other and communication skills. So maybe taking this from a skills perspective then, what are the key skills that you as a leader of a team need to have in order to kind of create that culture and environment you've just described?
Go ahead.
One of the key skills is to be a storyteller. So the chief exec is the storyteller in chief. And through the communication of a persuasive, compelling and attractive story of here's what we're trying to do, here's what this is about, here's what our values are, here's what we believe in, people will begin to associate themselves more strongly and align themselves with the project or the enterprise. So storytelling, good skill.
Okay.
Yeah, I managers and leaders sometimes find themselves looking for their skills in other people, and it's very easy to do. You can get frustrated that somebody doesn't think the way you do, act the way you do, deliver things the way you do. But one of the most important things about the skills is that you need different skills, and you don't want everybody to be like you. In fact, that probably would be the worst thing if you had a whole bunch of the same skill set. So it's looking for those diverse skills. It's looking for how you actually get them to interrelate with each other, so that people with different skills can respect the other skills that are being brought to the table, understand the value that they're bringing to whatever it may be, if it's the whole firm or to a project or to a piece of work. And it's something that takes time, I think, as a leader to mature yourself to that point, to understand that.
It's interesting you talk about kind of diversity, because that was one of the topics that came up in one of the previous sessions that we've done, how to manage diversity when it takes the first stage of self-awareness to understand that we need different things in a team, which is quite a step for quite a lot of people. And then how the kind of skills to bring, shepherd these different ways of looking at the world and different skills into the kind of thing is it's a challenge, isn't it?
So you want the diversity, so you get that range of ideas, and you want to use that diversity.
Yeah.
So the requirement from the leader and from the participants in the team, collaborative skills, how they can listen, respect what the other person has to bring, tease out what the value in it is in relation to the project or the goals that they're trying to accomplish, and harness those in some sort of dynamic or momentum to get the thing moving. I think another of the skills that the leader needs then is to notice what's working and spread some appreciation, so people can get to hear of the contribution that they're making to encourage further progress.
And I think also as a leader, again, another hard skill that takes maturing to actually bring to the surface is being able to recognize the weaknesses in your own skills, and being able to compensate for that with your team and be able to hand things off, trusting people to pick up where you're not strong. I certainly have many weaknesses, and I'm conscious of that, and as we put teams together, I always look at ways that I can balance things back in the right way by having people bring stuff to the table where I might be deficient.
One of the improvisational skills is letting go.
Okay.
So not having to be the perfectionist or in control of everything, and a leader that's willing to trade control for influence. They do have influence, but their control is usually an illusion. I've learned that in the network, where nobody works for the network, so it's all done by persuasion and influence. We've built that up to 6,000 people.
Yeah, I think we talked, I think, previously about the kind of the VUCA world that we have, the volatility and complexity, etc. And I think a lot of this is a reaction to that, by the sounds of things.
It's a response to that.
Yeah.
Being comfortable with uncertainty.
Yeah.
And that seems to me to be a necessary quality for being realistic in the world. To be uncomfortable with uncertainty, you're going to find it much more difficult to make progress. And the illusion of the certainty is, and this is the big change that you referenced right at the beginning, that there was more stability and certainty in traditional industries and traditional world 10 or 100 years ago, and we don't have that now. So the new skill set is much more about being comfortable with uncertainty, making progress, telling a story where you don't know the ending.
And you know, on that, I think people used to have jobs for life. That was kind of the norm, right? And now that isn't the case. Whether that's just by natural evolution, but what you have to look at is not how am I going to find an employee who wants to be here forever. It's how am I going to keep that person here? How am I going to give them an environment that actually will keep them involved in my world, certainly the ones that you want to keep for as long as possible. And a lot of that is about skills and interactions. Back to the point of people having to come into work every day and spending more time with their colleagues than they do with their family. You have to want to do it. You don't want to come home to an unhappy house, and you can give those types of environments without spending a lot of money, just by making sure that you balance all these types of things, such as skills and the way people actually interact.
That kind of takes us back to the. I say I'll stop there and go. Are we kind of getting anything in before me asking all the questions?
Well, I was just going to say one of our tweets here is actually summarised what you've been saying quite nicely. It says so what you're saying is that it's actually about being comfortable handing off the leadership as the leader sometimes and being an intelligent follower. And it's about developing a team of leaders.
Yes, very much. I think you're not the leader, but leading goes on within a team and it passes around. So it's transferable and emergent leadership. So different people lead at different times, and people being comfortable to do that is a prerequisite of that working well. But you see so much more of that where you don't necessarily know who's leading, and you don't really need to know, as long as people are aligned to accomplish it and have some autonomy and some connection, then you see the fastest progress.
As a CEO of a fast-growing business, I have to let stuff go. And I've been with the company since the early days. I've watched the evolution, and it's very easy for me to want to keep control because I trust my skills, and I can't. So I have to hand this off. I have to have faith in my team. Now, to do that, obviously, I've got to make sure that my team is the best, that we pick the right people, and you're managing that, but also that they're given the support network that they need, whether it be through their peers or through myself or my management team. But by doing that, I can start to farm things off. And the more you do, the more you let things go, the more people impress you, the more happy I am with the results, the more happy they are, and the more comfortable I am giving away responsibility.
Yeah, you talked about kind of, it sounds like creating an environment, because one of the classic quotes I always love from a long time ago is leadership is creating an environment to allow your people to do their best work. And so what are other things that you would contribute to that environment about giving people the best opportunities?
I completely agree with that. Leader as coach is something that we're seeing as a development of that. So your leader is not controlling you or bossing you around or telling you exactly what to do, but is encouraging you to find your own ways to do the things by having more coach-like approach and spreading that through the organisation, so that coaching is not a formality, it's the kind of conversation that can happen at any time between people, both live and through these various media that bring us closer together.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. People generally are curious and they're creative. And yes, they have a job that they need to do, and you want them to achieve that and achieve it with great results. But you've also got to give people freedom for them to be able to explore that creativity and give them confidence that it's okay. And you have to do that obviously with balancing it out of getting the core results you need. But good leaders will find ways of doing that. Good leaders will open up opportunities. Good leaders will include people into situations that maybe are completely different to what that person really is doing on a day-to-day basis, but just because they've shown some curiosity to wanting to be part of something, give them the chance, because if you do, you're going to find great things.
In improvisation, we have the idea of freedom within structure, and one of the leadership qualities is to manipulate the structures in such a way that people find their freedoms.
Okay. I think it's then going on to think, well, what are some of the problems? So we've kind of gone solutions there and actually what we want to do. What are the things that kind of aren't working at the moment? You go, actually, we need more work on that. Anything that comes to mind in that trait?
I would ask, where do you see the highest performing teams? And a lot of the answers that people give when we ask this in workshops and trainings is sports teams. And they've got pretty clear structures. They're trying to win a game or a league, and they know what they're doing because it's easily expressed and described. And a lot of teams in business are less high performing than that, partly because what they're doing is more complex. And so getting teams to bridge that gap from being just a team to being a high performing team, and what does that mean in their environment, is one of the things to pay a lot of attention to.
There's the old saying, you're only as strong as your weakest link. Now, we all have to accept that every chain has an end. So there's always going to be a weakest link. And that's okay. And you shouldn't be afraid of that. And you shouldn't be kind of trying to find that and punish it. But what you need to do is encourage people to be their best. I think with environments, you do need to weed out things that are negative. When I say weed out, you can kind of coach people, you can develop people, you can find ways of helping people be their best. But you also got to watch out for things that you don't think are going to improve and address them.
A couple of other problems is people are very attached to old ways of thinking about things. So they have mechanical metaphors when we need more network and growth, and biological metaphors for how things are more realistically in current environment. And that we're very attached, partly through that mechanistic way of thinking, to belief in plans that actually turn out to be out of date before they hit the shelf or are published. And letting go of that reliance on the plan to be more flexible, improvisational, and respond well and adapt in the moment.
Interesting. That kind of takes me back to my project management background, and like I say, you've got to have that balance. So we have a plan, so we kind of know what we're doing, yet you've always got to be able to then flex from that to go, actually, what's emerged. So it's that kind of, we have a plan, but also our ears are open to what's changed since we actually wrote it 2 weeks ago.
If everything has changed significantly and you try and get back to the plan, you're trying to hold on to something that's no longer topical.
Exactly.
And you still see a lot of that in organisations. So there are other ways of looking at the world and talking about it and describing your organisation. The organisation chart needs demolishing.
Yes, exactly. It's like, just because it's on the wall doesn't mean it's the truth today. When it was put on the wall, that was probably our best idea.
I mean, I have a project management background as well, and I don't think I've ever seen a plan seen through it and delivered as you set out in the beginning. And as a company, it's the same thing. You have a market you're addressing, and as I've gone through my journey, the amount of times people told me, by the time you get to where you think you want to be, it's a different place. And it's absolutely true. Week on week things change. You have an idea of where you're going,
and it's fine.
It's fine, and you should not only accept it but embrace it and take joy from it. And if you can do that, then obviously you can harness all that kind of momentum to continue to evolve, and you can find potentially even better things than you ever imagined when you set out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I read a story of Jim Clark, who started 3 of the biggest internet companies, and on his third one, his investor said, "Can you show us the business plan?" And he said, "There isn't one." And the investor said, "Oh, we're in anyway."
Yeah, exactly. I think that's it's that kind of great diversity of ideas where everyone thinks, oh, you've got to have a business plan, you've got to have the classic 10 slides to get investment, but actually it's just getting together good people is often as good a business plan as is good enough.
It's almost everything. Every single investor I've met would say that they invest in people, and it's absolutely true. And certainly in the journeys I've been on, whether I'm building a project team or building a team, I've built many teams through my career, and it really is about the people. Not only do you obviously want to have the right people around you, let's go back again for the third time to you spend most of your life with your colleagues. Are these people you want to spend your time with? An old manager of mine once said, I was interviewing somebody, he said, well, did he pass the layover test? I said, well, what's that? He said, well, would you be okay sitting in an airport lounge for 6 hours with this person if there is a flight delay?
Okay, I'll need to have an interesting thought about some of my friends about the layover test now. That's brilliant. Okay, brilliant. Kylie, anything that's coming in?
Just got some people asking kind of how do you kind of ensure that you develop that culture and environment? How what kind of learning and development do you do with your teams and organisations to kind of nurture that culture and environment that you've described?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard, right? Because everybody's working hard and everybody's kind of focused on your day job. It's very difficult to stop and take a step back, but it's important to do. And I think managers and leaders, and I've been a culprit of this, don't do that as much as they should. You know, it should be just something that's regularly built into the DNA of your team, of your company, of your business. I have always been, and I say this to all my staff, whether I was working for somebody else or working in the company that I'm running, never be afraid to ask me for education or training, or if there's something that you want to develop yourself with and you need a skill. I might not always say yes, it might be too much, it might not be, but we'll always have a discussion, and whenever I can, I will. You know, back when I was in the railway, you know, there was a guy he'd been in that business for his whole life. That was back to where he had a job for life, and he was near retirement, and he took a shining to me and kind of mentored me. But one day he said, hey, do you want to learn how to drive one of those little buggies that you drive the stuff up to the train with, because you never know when you might need that. I'm kind of thinking, well, I'm in an office job, I'll never actually need that. And he said, Matt, never turn down a new skill, it doesn't matter what it is. And I've thought about that my whole career. I truly believe that. I think embrace new things, embrace new skills, and develop yourself in any way possible.
I think it's often it's taking that on, because even if you don't use that skill, I've found this, that it gives you another perspective on someone else's job or someone else's view of the problem or something like that. Yeah, absolutely.
There are loads of things that you can do, and taking that time out, particularly to develop the skills of collaboration are learnable and practicable outside of the direct work environment. So finding time to reflect and examine those is well worth doing.
You know, another thing that, so I was lucky enough to work recently for a very large software house that I have massive respect for. It's a US-based financial technology firm. They are really big into philanthropy. It comes right from the top, from the founder, from the CEO. And when I arrived there, was so impressed with how much they were doing in the community. And what I ended up doing in my short time there was spend a lot of time having my team go out in the community and participate in this. And we were doing everything from cleaning up the rivers in the Thames, where there's a lot of garbage, and it was really quite nasty, but you know, it needs to be done. We were kind of boxing food for the homeless. We did all kinds of things. But the most important thing that we came out of it was not just obviously building the relationships within the team, but I think it was, as you were saying before, we're seeing the world from somebody else's eyes, and some of the other things that go on in the world. And I think from doing that, people find a little bit more in themselves. Yeah,
exactly. Thank you. I think we're just about out of time now. So firstly, I've got to say thank you so much to Paul and Matt. I think that conversation has been flown past as always, but really great to hear. Thank you very much again, Kylie, for bringing the stuff in. So just to say that this is the last episode, also not the last episode, the end of today's session. We'll be talking about creativity and resilience next time. But for today, remember you can get us on Exec Ed TV and also at Regent Leader. But for today, that's it for Regent Leadership Live.